In this video, we will be creating a POST endpoint and discuss the different ways we can define path variables and request body. Select POST from the HTTP method list. Enter a path in the API path field. Let's assume that we are posting a new employee record by making a call to this API endpoint. And assume that the employee ID is 111. Select the checkbox because our request is going to have a request body, and enter application/JSON in the request body content type field because we will be sending JSON data to the API. Select exact from the match type list, and then enter the contents of the request body. Now we scroll down to the HTTP response section. Enter 201 in the response code field. We want our API to return 201 as the HTTP code. And enter application/JSON in the response content type field. Finally, enter the contents of the API response. Press the Publish API button to save the API. We will test the API endpoint by pressing the Test API Endpoint button. All the request fields are already populated, so we will go ahead and press the Test API button and wait for the API response. As expected, we have received the API response, and the code we have received is 201. And the response body contains the JSON data indicating that the employee record has been accepted. Let's now change the employee ID from 111 to 55 and call the API once again. The response we received from the server is 404. The server cannot find the requested resource. So what happened? Why didn't we get a response? The reason is that the server isn't aware of any POST endpoint that accepts the path variable 55 as employee ID. How can we make the POST endpoint accept different values for employee ID without requiring us to define a new POST endpoint? The solution is to make our POST endpoint flexible enough to accept any value for the employee ID. Let's go back to the API editor and replace 111 with a star. Save the changes. And let's test the changes we have just made. Replace the star with 111 and press the Test API button. The server has returned the response that we were expecting to receive. Now replace 111 in the path with 55 and run another test. And the server has returned the expected response once again. Let's try changing the employee ID one more time and check the API response. This time we will replace 55 with 500, and then we will press the Test API button. Server returned the expected response again. Let's run one more test, but this time we will change the body of the request and press the Test API button. Notice that the API has returned 404. The server cannot find the requested resource. The POST endpoint we created has been configured to expect a very specific request body. We will not receive a response if we call the API with a different request body. We will now go back to the editor and introduce additional flexibility into the API endpoint. We'll go to the HTTP request section. We will change the value of the match type field from exact to any. Press the Save button to save the changes. We are now ready to test the changes we just made. Replace the star with a value. Let's replace it with 500 and press the Test API button. We receive the expected response from the API. We will test the API one more time, but this time we will change the contents of the request body before pressing the Test API button. As you can see, the API server has returned the response because we instructed it to accept any value for the request body, as long as it is a valid JSON. In this video, we created a virtual API that is intelligent enough to accept different values for the variable in the path and accept any request body as long as the content type remains JSON. Having a virtual API such as the one we created in this video is helpful in development and testing scenarios where there is an API call in the path of execution, but the response of that API does not have any impact on the application logic that follows the API call. A virtual API can also help when a standard response or fixed set of standard responses are expected from the API.